Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another class called Torah Study with Rabbi P. Very creative, huh? All righty. Good afternoon, everybody, and I want to give a special shout out to my dear friends here at the JCC in beautiful Long Beach, California. All right, say hello, everybody. Hello. Okay, all right. Okay, so here we are. So I'm just going to introduce this class by saying, last week we had no class because I had posted that I was in Poland and Israel, and I have a lot to say about the trip, and there's a lot to discuss about the trip, but we're going to leave that for tomorrow. Myself and my daughter Chayleya, who's the oldest of my children, are going to do a special podcast live on Facebook at 5:30 California time, 5:30 p.m. California time. If you'd like to join us at that time, we're going to discuss in great detail about how we spent 5 days in Poland and then 5 days in Israel. So again, please join us tomorrow on Facebook Live, 5:30 Pacific time. And if you can't make it then, that's quite all right. It's going to be replayed forever. Okay? So whenever you get a chance, you can always view in. All right.
Any special title?
The special title is The Perelmuters Go to Poland and Israel. And that's it. That's the title. So it's going to be on Facebook Live, but it will also be sent to YouTube. So you don't have to worry. Okay? Now we got that out of the way. Let's get down to business. Our business is Torah study. And we only have 1 hour to discuss one of the most puzzling and interesting parts of the Torah, which is called the Akeida, the binding of Isaac. Now, the last time we got together, we talked about Abraham and how great Abraham was, right? He was what Maimonides writes, he was the great rock. He stood up against the entire world. Everybody was going one way, and Abraham said, no, you're all wrong. Everybody is wrong. It's my way. And Abraham stuck to his guns, and he prevailed. Right, and we talked a lot about Abraham and Sarah and his relationship with the world and how he converted many people over to what we call monotheism. And part of his experience was, as we talked about previously, is that every step of the way that we've seen is one test after another. That God has literally put him into difficult situations to see how Abraham is going to react. He tells him, you leave your homeland, and then of course there's a famine. He goes down to Egypt, he has this issue. So all along the way, Abraham is confounded with many different types of challenges, and Abraham comes out on top. And then we come to chapter 22. And chapter 22 in the book of Genesis, you don't have to look it up, but you can. It's on page 100. If you're following in the Stone edition. If you're at home following in someone else's edition, it doesn't matter, but in the Stone edition, it's page 100. And chapter 22 opens up with a very interesting verse. It says, and it happened after these things that God tested Abraham. Okay? Meaning that everything happened before him was kind of, part and parcel of being a human and going through different experiences. But now, God is going to really put Abraham to the test. Why? Doesn't give us any reason. Well, he didn't trust him. Wasn't going to trust Abraham that he was a loyal guy. But God wanted to see one last time, if he puts him to the ultimate test, what Abraham's reaction is going to be. And we're going to attack this problem from a number of different sources and angles. Okay? So he says to him, Abraham, and he replies, Hineni, here I am. That's always been an expression throughout the Torah that, righteous people, when they're ready to do God's bidding, whether it's Abraham or the prophets, Hineni, I am here, but it's not only that I am here and ready to serve. That's an important part of the things, whatever you're going to say. So he says to him like this, please take your son, your only one whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah. Right? So far, okay, we're going on a trip. Not bad. Why does he have to specify who he is? Because he says, take your son. Abraham says, but I have two sons. I have Ishmael. You're only one, but he's the only one to his mother. He's the only one to his mother. Whom you love. But I love them both. Isaac. Okay, fine. I got it. Okay, Isaac. And I want you to go on a journey, father and son bonding, to the land of Moriah. Okay, that doesn't seem to be such a hard trip, right? Now, what do you want? What do I want you to do when you get to Mount Moriah? Bring him up there as an offering upon one of the mountains, which I shall tell you. Okay, so here's already where the test comes in. So let me get this straight. You want me to take my one son from his mother Sarah, whom you promised that through him we're going to build this incredible large nation forever, and through him and his children you are going to give us this very land, and this very same person that you promised that you are going to make into a multitude of nations and all that, you want me to take him and bring him up on the mountain, and to, as it says here, and bring him up as an offering on one of the mountains. Am I correct? Well, I think God said, yeah, that's what I said. Okay, so now, what's Abraham's reaction to this test? So we go to verse number 3. So Abraham woke up early in the morning, and he saddled his donkey. He took his 2 young men with him and Isaac, and he split wood for the offering and stood up and went to the place which God had spoken to him. So right away now, we don't need anything else after this, because we know already that even though that this test is a very difficult test, because you're talking about taking your one son, a beloved son of the mother Sarah, whom you nurtured and cared for, and and put all your hope and your future, and God wants you to take him up on the mountain and bring him up as a sacrifice. Okay, I'm doing it. And Abraham's doing it. So if it had ended here, we would say that Abraham passed the test. This is what God wanted me to do. This is what I did. Thank you very much. But it doesn't end there. Yeah, it doesn't end there, right? Because what happens? So we're not going to go through each verse. I mean, most of you know the story already. Okay? He goes there. He sees the mountain. He tells his 2 lads that he takes with him, you stay here. Me and Isaac are going by ourselves. And he takes him with the wood and the fire. And they start up the mountain. Isaac looks to his father and says, Dad, I see wood, I see fire, I see the knife, I see everything, but I don't see the sacrifice. So Abraham says to him, don't worry, my son, God will show us the sacrifice when we get up on top of the mountain. I think by this time, Isaac already realizes that something different is going to happen. How come they're not carrying a lamb, they're not carrying a goat? So he realizes that they're in for something special. Now, make no mistake about this, that when we first start learning this section and we talk about it, I remember when I was a child and we learned about it, we thought of Isaac as being how old? 10, right? A lad. As a kid, he doesn't understand what's going on. So Abraham is taking him. Turns out he's not 10. If you go chronologically in the Torah, Isaac is here 37 years old. Because we connect this to Sarah's passing. Because the next step that we're going to have is Sarah passes away, and we juxtapose those two experiences together. Now, Sarah was 127 when she died. She was 90 when he was born. So, okay, I'm not a great, mathematician, okay? But I can figure that if you take 127 and who's 90, and when he was born, how old is he now? 37. So he's not a kid here. So he's not a kid. So you understand, it makes more sense that when they were walking up the mountain and he asks his dad, hey dad, where's the sacrifice? And God says to him, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. God will show us the sacrifice. That Isaac begins to realize now, that guess who's the sacrifice? Me. But look, what does he do? He continues. They continue up the mountain. They build an altar. And Abraham puts Isaac on the altar and he binds him. And Isaac is willing to do this because if he's 37 and Abraham is now how old? 137, right? So I'm betting that if they did a wrestling match, 37 versus 137, my money's on Isaac, right? Would you agree with me? Anybody here? No? I'd say heavy odds in Vegas that Isaac could take Abraham in a wrestling match. Okay? But he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. He says, Dad, if this is what you want and I'm ready to do this, okay. And he puts him on the altar. He raises his hand with his knife to do the deed. And guess what happens? An angel appears, grabs Abraham's hand, and says, Abraham, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, because this is not what God wanted you to do. God just wanted to see if you're going to be willing to go through this. Now I know that you are a God-fearing man, and that you will not withhold even the greatest gift that you have, you will not hold for me. So therefore now I know that you are worthy of all of the blessings that you're going to have from now into the future with Isaac, and he will grow and his children will be many, and da-da-da-da-da. And then Abraham sees this ram, and it's caught in the thicket. He takes the ram, he slaughters it and brings it up a sacrifice, and him and Isaac go triumphantly down the mountain again. This story has caused us a lot of concern, a lot of different concerns. Why? Because number one, it asks Abraham to do the unthinkable. I mean, the unthinkable, something that none of us even would remotely consider. I mean, imagine, I'm not talking about the times where you said to yourself, I'm going to kill my kids. We've said it. I mean, let's be honest, okay? Now, if you've had children and, okay, you know what? I'm going to kill that kid. You said it in your mind. You may have even said it out loud, and I'm going to kill you, but in all reality, you never really meant it. Or maybe if you meant it, you were not going to really do it, okay? Because it's an unthinkable. I mean, a parent is not supposed to kill their children. Okay? Children aren't supposed to kill their parents either. But that happens more likely than the other way around. You don't kill your children. This is one of the more basic facts, not even in Judaism. This is a universal principle of ethics. You don't go around killing children, and especially your child. So God asking him to do this is totally contrary to everything that Abraham believed in. I mean, Abraham, I mentioned to you before, brought monotheism into the world, but it wasn't only a monotheism that believe in one God and God is remote from us. God is actually involved in our daily lives. He cares what you do. And if he cares what you do, stealing is prohibited, murder is prohibited, adultery is prohibited. All of these things are totally prohibited. And now God is asking Abraham, his main salesman here on earth, the one who has proclaimed him throughout the entire earth, in his lifetime, to do something contrary to everything that Abraham thought that was ethical and moral. How? What's the story over here? I mean, I can imagine him asking him, look, Abraham, I want you to go into poverty. I got it. I want you to give up all of the luxuries of life. Give up your color television. Go only to black and white, whatever. Give up, I can't even imagine. Give up your cell phone. Okay? Could imagine. But this, okay. So let's try to unpack this a number of different ways. Okay. Number one, if you're a real stickler to the verbiage of the command itself, and this is where a lot of the scholars and philosophers hang their argument on. If you look precisely what God wanted him to do, you will see that God never asked him to kill Isaac. Let's go to the Hebrew just for a moment. If you go back to page 100 and you go to verse number 2, he says, Kachna es bincha, take your son, your only son, the son that you love, go to Moriah, Valeyu sham la'oila, and bring him up for an oila. Bring him up on the altar. It doesn't say anywhere here, and v'shachat. It doesn't say, and you should slaughter him. No, it doesn't say that. All it says is, Valeyu sham la'oila, bring him up on an altar. Meaning, that's all I want you to do. I don't want you. Now, the fact that la'olam is always referred to as a korban oila, that it's a whole consuming sacrifice, is something, okay, we understand that, but if you stick to the verbiage itself, and a lot of rabbis focus in, God is not asking him to kill his son. Never asked him to kill his son. All he asked him to do was to bring him up on the mountain, build an altar, and to put him on the altar. Okay? That's one way of viewing it. And if you view it that way, and if you believe that Abraham said to himself, he doesn't really want me to kill him, then you have to ask yourself, why did Abraham lift up his knife? If I just brought him up on the altar, is this enough? But of course this would not have been enough. Abraham had to go through the motions of trying to bring him as a sacrifice. So be it. So if this is enough to sway you to say, hey, you see, God is not a liar, God forbid. He wouldn't lie in saying, on one hand, I'm going to make Isaac a multitude of nations and great and all of that stuff. And on the other hand, I want you to slaughter him. God is honest to his word. He was very particular. Only bring him up on the altar and don't sacrifice him. Don't kill him. Okay, all right. So that's what we would call an easy way out, right? God never asked him to kill his son. So all of this hand-wringing and worrying and how could God do this and why did God do this and all of that stuff doesn't mean anything, because we can always explain it away as saying, hey, you know what? Abraham followed the orders. He did it. He brought him up as a sacrifice. Great. Mazel tov. Congratulations. You know what? That's why you're Abraham. Okay. I'd like to attack it from a couple of different other sources. I want to attack it from the fact that we say that Abraham was under the impression that he was going to sacrifice Isaac. The Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, writes in the book of Tanya, his monumental work on Chassidus, on Chassidic philosophy. He asks an interesting question. What's the big deal? What's the big deal about Abraham? We make such a big deal that Abraham sacrificed his son. He says that throughout the ages, if you think about it, and this hit me so much more when we went to Poland, as throughout the ages, how many Jews have died through sacrifice? Millions. Millions of Jews have died through sacrifice, right? I mean, what's so big deal about Abraham? God says to Abraham, sacrifice his son. Okay, big deal. People have been asked to sacrifice themselves for how many years? Thousands and thousands of years. Unfortunately, we've been asked to sacrifice ourselves.
And this was how long ago he was saying that?
This is the Alter Rebbe you're saying? This was in the late 1700s.
So already for hundreds and thousands
of course. You go back to the stories in the Bible. You go back to the stories, in the times of the Maccabees. You go back to, all of these things. Jews have sacrificed themselves. Now, how many times they've sacrificed their children? That is already a different story. Willing to sacrifice their children. But if God had come to you and you were convinced that this is God speaking to you, you weren't having a hallucination, you weren't high on anything, right? And God asked you to do it, many people would do it. Many people would do it. So what's so great about Abraham? He goes from the other extreme. I mean, we're talking about, how great Abraham, and how could he do it? How could he not do it? Abraham was a loyal guy, and God asked him to do this. And as a matter of fact, many people have done it. Okay, so what's the big thing about Abraham? Oh, there was an incredible. You never even think about it from that point of view. You always think of Abraham as the hero. So he says the greatness about Abraham is, if you look at the next very, very, very next verse number 3, what does it say? Vayashkem Avram baboiker. Abraham woke up in the morning. So the Alter Rebbe, focuses on that phrase that he woke up in the morning, and he says, who cares? Who cares what time he woke up in the morning? And if he woke up at 9, would we care? And if he woke up the next day, would we care? No. Here is the greatness of Abraham. When you are confronted with this issue of martyrdom, no one wants it. Anybody asks for it? No one asks for it, right? No one ever said to themselves, oh yeah, I wish, that we should have a pogrom, and people could come and slaughter us in our town. Whoever asked for that? When you go self-sacrifice through martyrdom, you're doing it reluctantly. We want to live. Judaism has always been a religion of life, right? Am Yisrael is chai. We live. We want to live. The fact that unfortunately throughout the ages we've been faced with this idea that we have to sometimes give up our lives for the sanctity of God. Okay, I'll do it, but I don't want to do it. I'd love to live another week. Especially since I made an appointment with my dentist, and you know how hard it is to get that appointment, and now you're asking me to go. I mean, come on, it's not fair. But nonetheless, we do it. But Abraham is Vayashkem Avram baboiker, not Abraham. When Abraham was given the instructions that I want you to bring Isaac as a sacrifice, he didn't hesitate. Others would have said, okay, you know what? God didn't give him a deadline. Let me hang out with him for 12, 15 years, then maybe, down the line, I'll get to it, God. Yeah. I'm bringing him, but, listen, I got so many things I have to do. A whole list that Sarah says, I got Vons and this and that. I got a laundry list of stuff that I have to take care of. When I finish everything else, I'll get to sacrificing Isaac. I'll do it, but not right now. And that's what most of us will do. It with delay. I've got the sniffles. I can't travel. It's COVID. The roads are blocked. I mean, every excuse in the book you would find. Not Abraham. Vayashkem Avram baboker. Abraham woke up with this zealousness. That not only, zealousness. That, God wants me to do it. I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to hesitate. I am going to fulfill God's will. This is the ultimate in faith. This is the ultimate in faith. That Abraham does not delay it. And that's why Abraham is great. And that's why Abraham is special. Because unlike many people, most people, almost all of the people would not do it this way. Abraham showed us that when God wants something to be done, you don't hesitate no matter what the circumstances are. And then, of course, then he translates it in our daily lives. Hey, you know what? God wants you to be a good person. God wants you to better yourself. God wants you to do this, to do that. And we say to ourselves, yeah, down the line, I'll get to it, I'll get around to it. Remember those buttons? Get around to it?
Yeah.
I'll get around to it. And guess what? We never get around to it. So Abraham showed us the way that when something needs to be done, when do you do it? Now. Not tomorrow, not the next day, not a week from now, but right now. This is, God wants it, it's done now. Go ahead, Jay.
I don't mean to interrupt
Please.
unnecessarily. Abraham slept on it.
Yeah, he did.
Very interesting.
Yeah, he did
thing,
sleep on it.
That if someone told me, I would stay up all night with nightmares and trying, but he slept on it. He said, let this settle in my soul to make certain that it was God and to make certain it was the right.
That's a very good point. That Abraham, wanted to be sure that good, and that's why it's interesting that you mentioned this, Jake, because then it says it took him 3 days to get there. Why did God pick something 3 days away? Why didn't he pick something that was right next door? He traveled all the way to Jerusalem because he wanted to make sure that Abraham wasn't confused. Like, when you're given something, a task of such enormity, maybe you do it because he confused him to such a point that he killed Isaac, haphazardly. No. I want you to have 3 days to think this through. And if in the 3 days, you come to yourself and you say, maybe not. Maybe I'll find somebody else called Isaac. Look around. Any Isaac willing to join me on a trip to Jerusalem? Maybe so that. Okay. So not. No, he didn't do that. He waited the 3 days. He was calm. He was collected, knew what he was doing. And then he took up Isaac. So the Alter Rebbe's approach to this is like the traditional approach. Abraham is great. He's wonderful. It's incredible that he did this. And not only did he do this willingly, but he did this with zealousness, alacrity. And that's how so when we have an opportunity to do something good, and from God, what happens? Don't hesitate. Don't wait. Hit the road running. Oh, okay. That's a wonderful way to do it post facto. Now that we know that Isaac was not brought as a sacrifice and that Abraham showed, so now Abraham is going to be at the top of the heap. When it comes to the Hall of Fame, Abraham is first ballot. Nothing to talk about. He goes in right away because God says about him, hey, I know that you are a worthy person and you thank you, because God was saying, you know what, if you don't pass this test, what's going to happen? People are going to say, it was fake all along. He wasn't real all along. You see, he was there until God pushed him, but there's a place where even God couldn't get Abraham to do it, so therefore everything that happened in the past is negated. Okay, hey, Mazel Tov, congratulations, he's in. This idea of Abraham doing it with alacrity and without hesitating is debated among many different philosophies and many different religions. There is a Danish philosopher called Søren Kierkegaard, Fear and Trembling. Okay? He wrote a book basically on this idea of the Akeida, of the binding. And he approaches this from the very same idea, and he asks this, it's a paradox. The whole thing is a paradox. How could this have happened? On one hand, Abraham was the foremost adherent to what we would call universal ethics. That there are things in the world that we understand as human beings that are wrong. You don't have to be an especially religious person. If I say to you, is murder okay? What would you say? No. Now you would say this everywhere at all times, right? Murder it's different than killing. Because killing, it could be justified. If someone's going to come kill you, you have a right to defend yourself, right? In a war, justified war, killing is all right. But murder, to just take an innocent person and slaughter him, that everybody would agree with, at least most people would agree with, that this is absolutely wrong. So this is what we would call universal ethics. And Abraham was an adherent. And this is universal. Now, when he uses the word everybody. Now, God comes to him and he says to him, I want you to do something that is completely contrary to what everyone else believes is just and moral. You're in a paradox. What should you do? On one hand, you have this life that you've been living that's ethical and moral, and now you're asked by the same authority that gave you this ethics and morals to do something that is not ethical and moral. So what do? So he says you have to take yourself out from universal, because you have to now rearrange. It's an existential problem. You have to now rearrange everything that you put up as a hierarchy in life. So if I said to you, what is to you the most important principle that guides your life, what would you say? Most of us would say universal ethics, right? That's how I live my life. I try to be a good person, and by being a good person, I follow certain principles. Don't murder, don't steal, don't lie, don't all the way down the list. And this is what we would call on top of your of the pyramid. So Kierkegaard argues that's not the top of the pyramid. Abraham had to make now a decision that that's not going to be the top of his pyramid, universal ethics. But what was going to be now, what was going to replace that as his telos? And he calls it the telos, that what was going to replace it as his guiding light, the most important thing? Faith. Faith now becomes more important than universal ethics. Think about it, because Abraham is now following a path that has to put ethics and morals secondary. He has to put it in the back of his thing. And this is the quandary that a person faces in life, right? Here you have faith that I want to do the right thing. I've lived my entire life, and now I'm faced with this quandary that God is asking me to do something contrary to that. So you're in a box. You're an absolute box. You don't know to turn left or you don't know to turn right. Okay? So Kierkegaard argues, no. Now, what we see that what is on top of it is faith. That Abraham must make this leap to faith. And of course, as a Christian theologian, then he goes on to explain, about how we have to live our lives based upon faith and not about, universal ethics, etc., so on and so on, and so forth. Okay. So that's, Marcia, you had a question that you wanted to say.
Was it faith or simple obedience?
It's faith. And this is what he calls it. He calls it faith because from faith comes obedience. You can't have obedience without faith. Faith is where it starts, meaning that you trust completely in whatever this is going to happen. So sometimes it's obedience, sometimes it's going to be some other aspect that it's going to take you somewhere. But faith is the wellspring of where we are nourished from. And this is also true, if you think about it for a second, if our highest ideal is Am Yisrael Chai, if our highest ideal is to live, that we as the Jewish people want to live, right? And we're faced now with this quandary that we have to somehow give up our lives. We are demanded now that, to do self-sacrifice. Possibly, what we will say? Well, so what if I lived in 1485, I'm living in Spain, and now I'm asked to convert to Catholicism, and I think to myself, okay, so what's better? What should I do? I want to live. That's my ideal. The only way I can live here in Spain is to profess that I'm a Catholic. So who cares? Who's going to care? So maybe I should do that. Why do I have to say that if someone comes to me and puts a gun to my head and says, I want you to bow down to that idol, why is it the necessity for me to take the bullet? Why not just bow down to the idol so I can live many more years with not bowing down to the idol? Well, that would be a very good question to people. And as a matter of fact, many people did take upon themselves to become Catholics. Some were fake Catholics. We know we call them the Marranos, right? The Marranos were fake Catholics. Some refused to convert. They lived as Jews. Okay, fine. And many of them did convert. Wholly, completely. And now, like in Spain, I think the word was when Hitler asked Franco, who was ruling Spain during World War II, to give up the Jews, Franco said, well, I have to give up half of Spain. Right? Because half of Spain has Jewish blood in it. So if you want half of Spain, come take half of the Spaniards, because half of Spain has Jewish blood in it. I may be exaggerating, maybe only 49%. So I may be exaggerating a point or two. But there was many Spaniards that had Jewish blood because many people converted. But what does Judaism demand of us? Take the bullet. Take the bullet. So here we see, why are we taking the bullet? On what basis? Faith. We have faith that this is what God wants us to do. He wants us to take the bullet for martyrdom. So there is something about this idea of faith being at the top of our things. Now, thank God. Let's be honest that for most of us, 99.99% of the time, our faith and moral ethics do not clash. I mean, God is not asking us in the Torah to do anything that is contrary to our belief system. If you take the mitzvahs, for example, take a mitzvah, putting on tefillin, keeping Shabbos, shaking the lulav and esrog, keeping kosher, is not unethical. This is part of the ethical structure of the world. So 99% of the time, we are asked to do something that is completely in line with our universal ethical belief system. Here in this particular case, Abraham was asked to do something, and God wanted him to perform this, so he did this, and great, he took the leap of faith, and now we know that, no matter what God wants of us, we are going to continue to trust him, that this is the right thing to do, even though we may not understand this. And to be honest, like many of the commandments, why not eat shellfish? Why not? I mean, is it any different than eating herring? Herring is kosher, great, and we all love, at least Ashkenazim, I could say, love schmaltz herring. Okay, schmaltz herring. At least the Sephardim have some good taste, Okay, so we love schmaltz herring. Is schmaltz herring any different than a shrimp? Why? No, because God said no. Sorry. Herring is okay, but shrimp is not okay. Doesn't make any reasonable sense to us why one would be kosher, one would not be kosher. But that doesn't matter to us. You know what? So if you don't eat shrimp your entire life, is it unethical? No, it doesn't go against our ethics. I must eat shrimp. Okay. Take, for example, bacon. Number one food here in the United States of America. We live here, and every restaurant and everything is bacon. But what do we say? I'm a Jew and I'm not faking. No bacon. Right there, no bacon, for us. We say, why? Chazer is so good. I get it, but not for me. Chazer is no good for me. Okay, fine. It's not unethical against this. It's not unethical, to eat chazer. So for most of us, 99% of the time. So this is where we have this idea, of faith supersedes, everything else. And if God says this is what he wants us to do, and we're doing it. If God says he wants us to take a red heifer, slaughter it, and sprinkle some of us on our heads, we don't say, why should I do that? Like your teenager would ask. Why should I do that? Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't matter, doesn't play a role in here. It's not always about rationality. This is what I want you to do, and we follow it. Okay. Now we'll go on. When I was in Poland, my mother, as I mentioned to you before, was raised in Poland. She was raised in the community of Ger. Ger was a particular Hasidic sect. It was basically centered around Warsaw, and they had, I can't even tell you, hundreds of thousands of followers, followed the Ger Rebbe. It was very busy. My mother and her father before that, all were Ger followers. And when we were there, we went to Ger. We went to this little town, Ger, where there's nothing. There's no remnants of anything. The old shul is still the old shul. Nothing wasn't renovated. It's barren. Then we went to the cemetery in Ger. And in the cemetery are buried two of the Ger Rebbes, the leaders of the Ger community, the founder, who was called the Chadusha Yarim, and the Sfasemis, who lived around the turn of the 20th century. He lived in the early 1900s and is buried there. So they went into the burial site. And it's nothing. It's sad. Have a small little plaque like this of these two great luminaries and everything else. Some family members scattered around the tomb, but that's it. So we went in there. We prayed. That is. So I want to talk a little bit about the Sfasemis. He was the third Rebbe of Ger. He was a brilliant scholar. And he wrote a fascinating commentary on the Torah called the Sfasemis, which is copied and spoken about by many thousands of people. Quote him, and he has a commentary on this story, and he goes a different direction than the Alter Rebbe went, where the Alter Rebbe, who was also a Hasidic master, said, hey, look, this is fantastic. Abraham did this willingly, and not only willingly, but with alacrity and with zeal, and with this. He goes very differently. He goes and he says like this. He says, let's analyze some of the terms here in the story. And you have to be creative, to be honest. To be a scholar and to be a commentator on the Torah, you have to have first and most important an imagination. Okay? You have to have an imagination. Because if you don't have an imagination and you only look at the words are dry. But with an imagination, what happens to the words? They begin to wake up. All of a sudden, out of slumber, all of a sudden the words are waking up and they're making sense. To you. What does he say? He says, okay, let's tell the story. Abraham got this a thing, and he went ahead, and then God told him, bring up your son as a sacrifice, and it meant as a sacrifice. We're not playing around, with nuances. As I say, he meant he wanted him on the thing, and he wanted it to go there. Okay, fine, and he brought him up, and we went. Okay. Then he says, let's do verse number 4, because this is where the critical verse is. Vayayim hashlishi, on the third day, vayisav rames einav, Abraham raised his eyes, vayares hamakom merachik, and he saw God from the distance. Okay? Now, the Sfas Emes stops at this verse and asks, okay, what's the difference? What do you mean that you saw the place from a distance? We know. He lifted up his eyes and he saw the place. Why does it matter to us what it was? Distance, not distance? What is this term trying to tell us here? Vayares hamakom merachik. He saw the place from a distance. So he stops. There's a very creative commentary. He says like this: the term for place is called makom, place. But we also know that makom is sometimes referred to in the Torah as God. Yeah. Right? When, God forbid, you go into a house of Shiva, there was a special verse that we all say, a statement, Hamakom Yenachem Eschem, may God comfort you among the mourners, etc., etc., etc. How do we refer to God at that moment? Hamakom, the place. The place. Meaning that everything is, why do we call him the place? Because every place is his. He is everywhere. So we call him the owner of this particular place is God. So one of the nicknames, I use the nickname, is Hamakom. God is called Hamakom. And he takes that and he puts it into the verse. And what does he say at this? He says, Vayares Hamakom. At this particular time, Abraham saw Hamakom is referring to whom? God, Meirachok, from a distance. Oh, think about that for a second. Vayares Hamakom Meirachok. Abraham saw God from a distance, meaning that the relationship at this particular moment that Abraham had with God from the moment that he started his campaign was Abraham was we talk about the emotion, the attribute of kindness. Abraham did everything from kindness. Where does kindness come from? It's very close to this emotion called love. We love. I love humanity. I love people. And because I love people, I'm going to be willing to extend myself. If I didn't love people, I'd have a very difficult time doing anybody a favor. Why? Do it yourself. What do you need me? But because I love individuals, because this emotion is always beating hard on in my heart, I'm willing to extend myself. And that's true about my relationship with God. That my relationship with God is based not upon fear, that I'm worried about what God is going to punish me or God is going to do something to me. No. I follow him because I love him. Because to me, he's like a father, he's like a friend that you can trust and always do the right thing because I have this incredible love that I have for God. And that's how Abraham based his entire ideology based upon that. I love you because you're a good guy, and I'm just doing. Why do I fight against the kings? Why do I do this? Why do I do that? Because of my tremendous love for you. And that's why chesed, that's why Abraham is always referred to as kindness, because he doesn't care. He doesn't look at you. He's not interested. You're a good guy, a bad guy. I mean, In the beginning of the portion, the poor guy is sitting there 3 days after circumcising himself at 99. He's sitting k'chayim. The day is hot. You ever been in a desert? It's burning hot. Okay, Miami in August, and he's sitting out there. Why is he sitting out there at the tent? He should be in bed. With a couple of. Oh, I thought it was me. He should be sitting in his tent with painkillers. I don't know, with a Percocet or some Tylenol, Vicodin. I mean, he should be popping pills, like all day long. At 99, you try to circumcise yourself and see if you'd be sitting at the entrance of a tent. Okay? That's what he should be doing. Why is Abraham sitting at the entrance of a tent? Because he's looking for visitors. The moment he sees 3 guys appear, and it's also curious to us, why does God make the angels appear at that moment? Why doesn't he wait 2 weeks? Abraham's feeling better. He's healed. The bandages are off. Everything. No, the 3rd day, because he saw the pain Abraham was in. There's no one to serve. I only live to serve other people. That was Abraham's whole existence. So God said, okay, if the man is suffering so much, he wants to see. Okay, he brings the 3 angels. And what does Abraham do? You think about it, it's crazy. He tells God to do what? You wait here. I got to attend to the 3 people. Isn't that what it says? If you don't trust me, you could go to the beginning of the section. Abraham says to God, here, you wait here. Imagine telling that to God. You say, you know what, dear God, take a breather, get yourself something to drink. I'll be right back. How does he do that? Who has the chutzpah to do this? Only Abraham, because God knows that what he's doing is, and that's what the Talmud says, that receiving guests is even greater than receiving the presence of God in your life. Imagine that. So Abraham was all about love. And then all of a sudden God comes to him and tells him what to do what? Something that is so contrary to everything that he believes in. He tells him to take his son and sacrifice his one beloved son, Asher Ahavta, which you love so much. And Abraham loves Isaac, he loves God. What does Abraham do here? Again, we go back to the old passage that he's confounded. He's confounded. What do I do? I'm in this paradox. I don't know what to do. But Abraham is the ultimate follower, right? The ultimate follower, whether it's faith, whatever it is. So Abraham does it. But unlike the Alter Rebbe, who says that that he jumped at why he woke up in the morning, he did it because he did it. But here, here his relationship with God is at a distance, meaning that it's not the love and caring God that God wants to feel, that Abraham wants to feel to, but it's a very, very distant kind of a relationship right now. Abraham is going, but he's not going happily. He's going reluctantly because God wants him to do this, but he's not happy about him. And he wants to prove this. How do you know that? How do you know that? You prove this, that that Abraham was reluctant? Because if you go later on, he says to him, when the Malach holds his hand, you play Abraham, you pick up your hand, and he holds his hand like this. Okay, you can put it down. I'll pick it up, down. There we go. Okay. And he says, Abraham, what does Abraham say? Hineni, I am here. Al tishlach yadcha lanar, don't touch the lad. Al tasle me'umma, and don't do anything to him, because Abraham says, wow, man, I've slept all the way up here. I build the ark, I tie him. Let me just give him a nick, at least a scratch, something. Let me do something to him. So the angel says, don't sacrifice him, and don't do anything. Don't even touch him. With the knife. Why? Because now I know. You know what? I'm 137 years old at this point. I've been doing this since, what did we talk about last week, 2 weeks ago? How old was he according to Maimonides when he first recognized God? Come on, someone say it. 40. He was 40 when he recognized God. So almost 100 years he's following God. And the angel says, Ki ato yadaiti, because now I know. Give me 1 second, because I'm leading up to the climax here. The climax here. Because now I know. What do you know now? Now you know something today more than you knew 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 2 months ago. Now I know. And what are the next word? Kirei Elokim Ata. That you are a God-fearing man. Okay? Not that you are a God-loving man, but you are a God-fearing man. Your entire life, you lived with this love in your heart, and your caring to me was all about love. But now I know that there's also a part of you that also has this awe to me, this God-fearing awe to me. And now I know that you are complete. And the Sfas Emes goes on to say, and that is our lives. That our lives have to be a blend of what we call awe and love. Awe and love, because love is one of those emotions that, under the chuppah, I've done a few weddings in my life, okay? Under the chuppah, the one emotion that flows through the groom and bride is love. I try to tell them it should be fear, but they don't want to listen to me. I try to counsel them, it should be fear, but no. They look at each other, and you look at them, they're young, they're enthusiastic, they're optimistic that their entire lives are going to be like this particular day. What is it? Love. They love each other, right? They love each other. And that's true. They should love each other, and they should continue to love each other. And we blessed them under the chuppah that for many years, this love. But at the very same time, a person is not complete, because guess what happens after a few years? You look at her, she looks at you. You look at her, she looks at you. And whatever. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset. Do you love me? Do I remember that? Do I love you for 25 years? See, okay, then all of that stuff. So love is wanes, it comes and goes. That you are a God-fearing person, and that's why I put you through this test to show that you needed to be complete. I know you have love, but you also have to have the awe and the fear of the Almighty. And that's where the Sfas Emes comes in to say that God put him through this, even though Vayaras HaMakom Merachok, and Abraham said, I will do it to you, but never again. Once, but never again will you ask this of any of my children ever again. And God says to him, don't worry about it, this is a one-off. This is a one-time, because I don't want my children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren to ever be faced with this test. Now, letting yourself go is one thing. Bringing your children as a sacrifice willingly, that's something that was never asked again. God put that, that test away and locked it up for never coming back. And that was the Sfas Emes. That is all. I mean, you have here. This is the beauty of the Torah, because you have two giants in the Torah world. You have the Alter Rebbe, Mishna Zalman of Liadi, looking one way at the story. You have the Sfas Emes, another giant of Torah, looking another way. But both of them come to the same kind of roads parallel together, and they come together of the idea that Abraham did exactly what God wanted him to do. Marcy, go ahead.
I'm struggling to understand this whole concept of faith.
Okay.
So for me to have ultimate faith in God, I have to fear God.
Yes, fear God.
But to fear God.
Fear God but fear is not in the sense you have to have awe. Awe. It's like think of example a king.
But it says a God-fearing man.
Yes.
What's the point of that?
No, but because
now I know you're a God-fearing man.
Yes. Because there are going to be things that you are going to do, that God is going to ask you to do, that love may not get you over the hump. There also has to be that element of, now I don't think of fear like a guy is standing with a gun to your head. I think of this fear as a sense of tremendous awe, like you're standing in front of the Grand Canyon.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, the Grand... Oh, okay. Now he's going to the official clock. But okay. So this is something that we can discuss at greater length at another time. The awe aspect, because I do want to get to one more philosopher that I do want to talk about. But the awe is a sense of where we're not. Love has this familiarity, right? This familiarity, I love you. There is still a small sense of ego that goes into love. Because as the one who loves has this ego. Awe is very different. Awe says to you, we're completely nullified. There's a nullification of complete ego, where I stand in front of something that is so incredibly greater than me. I lose all sense of who I am. And that is part of what makes up a human being that has faith. Because there are going to come times where God is going to ask you to do things that love may not get you over. But if you're standing in the presence of God and you have awe may get you over this fear factor, this fear, not of punishment, but the fear of disappointing, this incredible entity that we call God will get you over the hump. We will continue to talk about this idea, but I do want to get to one last thing, only because we have a few last minutes. And this is more of a radical aspect. Now, I'm going to tell you right off, before I'm going to give an introduction, that this is not a traditional viewpoint. Okay? But I think it's an interesting one. There was a fellow by the name of Emil Fackenheim, that was a Holocaust survivor. And he came to Toronto and became a philosopher and headed the Department of Philosophy, University of Toronto. Later on, he retired to Jerusalem and became the head of the philosophy department at University of Hebrew University. Thank you, Hebrew University. He was a brilliant person who came up after the Holocaust with this 614th commandment. We know there's 613. He came up with 614. Don't give Hitler a posthumous victory. Do things Jewishly as not to give Hitler a posthumous victory. Marry Jewish. Do things Jewish. Have a mezuzah, even though you may not buy it. Put up a mezuzah. Make a statement. Make a statement. Okay. Very Jewish man, very traditional man, and very much involved in Judaism as well. One day he's walking down the street and he's approached by a young Haredi individual. Now, the Haredim are? Haredim are the ultra-Orthodox. You know them by the long payas, the hats, the long coats. And he says to him, Dr. Ackenheim, is there a time I could meet with you for a few minutes at your office? His students were generally more secular, but a young Haredi person wants to speak to him. He says, sure, come to my office Tuesday, 1 o'clock. Tuesday, 1 o'clock, the young Haredi individual comes down and sits across from him and says, Doctor, I have a question to you, specifically from the story of the Akeida, of the binding. He says, why is it that when God gave the commandment to Abraham, it was God himself who came to Abraham? God says, Abraham says, here I am. God says, I want you to take Isaac and bring him up as a sacrifice on the mountain. And yet, when God wants to stop him, what does he do? Why? Why does he send an angel? How come God himself doesn't come down and tell Abraham to stop it? See, we can read this 1,000,000 times, and this question will never pop into our head, because we think, okay, but this fellow asking this professor, who he knows that is a philosopher that has been thinking about this for many years, he says, how come it happens to be an angel that God sends? Why does God himself not come down? So Dr. Emil is thinking, and he says, it's a good question. It never really dawned upon me why this is so. He says, he says, yes, I have an answer that I'd like to propose to you. And he says, what is it? And he says, because God wanted him to say no. Think about this for a second. God wanted Abraham to say no. Meaning that when he gave him this commandment to go sacrifice, God wanted Abraham to stand up and said, you know what? I'll do a lot of things for you, but this I will not do for you. This is against everything I believe in. So it's again contrary. I mentioned to you before that this is not a traditional viewpoint. It's not my traditional viewpoint. I just want to get that out there. But it's interesting, and the Dr. Emil listens to him. Now, this is a preeminent philosopher, and listens to him, and the man continues, and he says, and I'll prove it to you. You know why God was angry with him? Because God never again speaks to Abraham. After that point, communication between God and Abraham is over. From now on, it's Abraham's story, and he dies, and Isaac gets married. Then God has a relationship with Isaac, but with Abraham, he never speaks to him again. Dr. Emil listens to what he says, ponders it. Now, he's a serious person. This is not like a fly-by-night guy. He thinks about it. He says to him, I have to be honest with you. This is not what I was expecting to come out of your mouth. I was expecting this to come out of some secular Jew who, many people after the Holocaust denounced God, that God had abrogated our covenant with him. He says, but you know what? In 1937, you would have said this to me. I would have said, you're completely wrong. You are wrong. Because God wanted him to go through it. After the Holocaust, and seeing what man does to man, I'm not so sure that I don't agree with you. That Abraham had said to God, I'm not going to do this. We don't know how humanity would have, but the fact that Abraham went ahead and said yes. Okay. Now, this is something that we have to unpack a lot. I mean, when I first read this, my first reaction was, how can you say this? This is Abraham, and this is God. Now Abraham is going to say no to God. How could Abraham say no to God? But when you think about it a little more, as the philosopher said, that after the Holocaust, when you see how people have dealt with each other and how the cruelty of one nation against another nation, and if you know anything about the Jewish community, there were no threat to Hitler. No threat. You go to any of the Holocaust museums and you look at the faces of the Jews that were killed, in any of the death camps, what were they? Nothing. I mean, I wouldn't say nothing. I mean, I wouldn't mean to say they were nothing. There were no threat to Hitler's war machine. Now, if you tell me, look, they all had guns and they swore that they're going to fight Hitler, they weren't. These were scholars, they were doctors, they were business people, they were mothers, 1.5 million children. Tell me 1.5 million children faced a threat to Hitler? No, but this was pure evil. This was absolutely pure evil, what one person could do against another person. So Dr. Falkenheim thinks to himself about the pure banality of evil, that it can happen to anybody, anywhere, all the time. This was one of the things that Eichmann's trial that Hannah Arendt wrote, about people were angry with her because she said, well, there's no difference in the other evil. And everybody was up in arms. How could you say that Nazism wasn't different than the other evil? Well, evil is evil. Okay, but we'll leave that topic for for another time. This is a radical departure from the traditional way of looking at things. I only wanted to bring this up because we're talking about the story of this. I don't think that this is what the story is based on. That Abraham should have said no, because first of all, we'll never know what would have happened if Abraham had said no, to God. But this is another perspective, out there, in the world. Again, the reason that we do this every Wednesday is because hafachba v'afachba the kolaba. The word is that we learned in the ethics of our sages, when we learned the Pirkei Avos, go over it and go over it and go over it, because everything is inside of this. The Torah is so full, of wisdom, and so full of of ways of how we live, not only to tell a story of that happened 3,500 years ago, but how it relates to us today in our daily lives. I mean, what to do and when to do and how to do it. Everything is in the Torah, and that's why we're still here talking about Abraham 3,500 years after the story happened. Anyways, Helen, so did someone have
to say that Abba said no to God when he sent people to save Lot, to Sidon.
No, he said, don't do it.
He said,
Try not to do it. He did argue with him at the point about not killing innocent people. Anyways, I want to say goodbye. Just to announce to the people in the Facebook world, again, if you would like to know a little bit more about our trip to Poland and Israel, check in with us tomorrow. That's going to be Thursday, November the 21st at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 8:30 Eastern time, and then we'll give a whole rundown on what our trip was, and you can all join us in there tomorrow. Anyways, I want to say goodbye to the Facebook world, so let me say thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day.